Welcome this afternoon to the Foreign Service Fellowships Information Session with ANSA. My name is Shay Masterson. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are recording the session for later use. I would like to first take a moment and introduce my colleagues who are joining us today. First, also from the Office of National Scholarship Advisement, we have Dr. Stoff. And then from the State Department, we have Southwest Diplomat in Residence Antoinette Hurtado. And we're so happy they both can join us today. You don't just get my insight, but both of theirs, which is going to be invaluable for you all. So first things first, to go over our agenda for today. So a quick overview of how this information session is going to go. We will start with telling you a little bit about what ONSA is, or the Office of National Scholarship Advisement here at ASU, in case you have not joined us for a session before or met with our office. Then we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about what the Foreign Service is. And that's going to be where it's so great to have our diplomat in residence with us today to share firsthand experience what the Foreign Service is all about. We'll then talk about the graduate fellowships that lead to the Foreign Service. We'll focus mostly on those fellowship opportunities, but then we will also share some other national awards as well as ASU specific opportunities that can be good building blocks to the graduate fellowships if you're not quite ready to be focused on applying to graduate school and graduate fellowships quite yet. So some things to think about if you're a little bit earlier in your academic career right now. And then we'll finally wrap up with some next steps for you, again, depending on where you're at in your academic career and what's going to be next for you specifically. So that's just a general overview of our session today. Please feel free to type any questions in the chat as you have them. I will do my very best to keep an eye on them and answer them in real time. Although if the question is going to be answered later in the presentation, and I know that, I'll hold off on addressing it in that moment. But please feel free to do ask those questions at any time in the chat, and then we'll open it up if you want to audibly ask any questions at the end. All right. So moving right along. First, Office of National Scholarship Advisements or National Scholarships. What are they exactly? Because they're not your ASU scholarships or typically not general undergraduate funding either. So first off, you guessed it, they are national and sometimes international awards that take applicants from all over the country and sometimes all over the world, although most of the ones that we're going to focus on today do only take applicants from the US. So the applicant pool and the funding is both national or international, right? So the money's coming nationally or internationally, and the applicants are coming from across the country or across the world. So really everything our office advises on fits into that kind of basic description. Also, most of them are experiential. So while many of them, especially the graduate fellowships we'll talk about today, are very generous dollar amount funding for your education endeavors, not all national scholarships are as generous or for general academic funding, but they all come with some kind of experiential component that's going to be beneficial to you. So sometimes that can be internship experiences, study abroad experiences, language acquisition experiences, mentorship, professional development, leadership development. So really everything, again, that our office advises on, regardless of the dollar amount that comes with it, is also going to come with some kind of experiential component that's going to be a really great opportunity for anybody who's selected. Because of how generous these are and because the applicant pool is so far-reaching for national scholarships, it also means these awards are pretty highly competitive. So most people who apply are not going to be selected, not because they're not worthy or strong candidates, just because there's not enough to go around, unfortunately. So with the Graduate Foreign Service Fellowships, generally speaking, they're going to hover around the 5% selection rate. Correct me if I'm wrong, Antoinette there. But typically it's going to be around that range of selection. Some fellowships or scholarships we advise on, it's a little bit of a higher selection rate. Sometimes it's even lower. But you all are going to be great candidates for whatever is most suited for you. And we're here, the Office of National Scholarship Advisement, to help ensure that you're applying for the things that are most well suited for you. If you're interested in the Foreign Service, it is likely going to be a Foreign Service Graduate Fellowship. Or something else that we advise on. So we're here to help you kind of narrow down those choices, make sure you're applying for the things that are most well suited for who you are and what you want to do, which in itself is going to increase your chances of being in that competitive side of being selected. And then we're here to help you through that process as well. So in a nutshell, those are the scholarships or fellowships that our office focuses on. There's about 100 or so awards that we advise on the application process for. The Foreign Service focused fellowships are just a handful of them. And our role is really here to support the ASU community in pursuing these types of opportunities. So we provide information sessions like today. We provide workshops to help you work on your personal statements for applications such as these. We provide general guidance on, how to craft strong applications, but then we also provide very specific feedback for you on your application materials. We do this both on an individual basis and in group settings, depending on the fellowship and kind of where you're at in the process. If there's an interview component to the fellowship application process, which with the graduate foreign service fellowships, there are, if you are selected for that stage, then we will also help you prepare for your interview. Again, by giving general guidance, but also doing practice rounds with you beforehand, if that's something that you would like to receive support in. So the interview component is also something. If an award does require nomination or endorsement from your home university, the Foreign Service Graduate Fellowships do not require nomination or endorsement from your home university. But if you're applying for an award that does, our office manages that process as well. We do not control it. We do not select who is nominated or endorsed, but we manage that process for the university and for you all. And just we're in general here to really be your cheerleaders, be your support system through the process, connect you to others who are also going through the fellowship applications process. So you're not alone, and you have people to bounce ideas off of and again, get that feedback from. So in a nutshell, that's what our office is here to do to support. We do not select the winners for any of these awards. We just help you through that application process and be as prepared as you possibly can be. So if you're going to apply for any of these, our work together does not end today. It just begins, and we're here to support you through the entire process of applying for any one or multiple of these awards. And I just had a question come through about endorsement. So it's not ANSA who's limited, it would be the university who's limited. But for some awards where it is required for nomination or endorsement, say for instance, like the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. That's a postgraduate fellowship that we'll mention briefly later. That requires ASU endorsement or nomination as you apply for the award. We are not limited as a university how many from ASU we can nominate or endorse. On the other hand, there are some awards where we are. So it really just depends on the specific award. Again, it's not required for the Foreign Service graduate fellowships at all. So there's no limit on how many from ASU can apply or even be selected for any of these awards. But there may be others where we are. It's really on a case-by-case basis. That information is on our website, and I'll share those links and information later so that you can kind of filter through at your own leisure to determine. But again, for these ones, it's not going to be a concern. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to hand it over to our expert on the Foreign Service, our Southwest Diplomat in Residence. Again, for those who just are joining us, that's Antoinette Hurtado, and she's going to share with you all a little bit about her background and what the Foreign Service is and what life in the Foreign Service is like. I would welcome you to again ask those questions in the chat that you have for her that are specifically related to the Foreign Service. Although we may have to limit some things because we want to talk about the fellowship opportunities after she gives the overview of the Foreign Service. So please share those in the chat and I'll make sure she has a chance to answer them for as many as we have time for. Thank you.
Thanks, Shay. So, hi, everyone. I'm Antoinette Hurtado. I am a Foreign Service officer in the U.S. Department of State. So that's one of the careers that some of these fellowships can lead to. So I've been doing this for what will be 19 years next month, actually. So going on 2 decades as an FSO, is an acronym for everything in the State Department. So Foreign Service Officer is an FSO. I've served overseas in Australia, Brazil, Afghanistan, Italy. I've served in some assignments in Washington, D.C., where our headquarters is. And then now I'm serving as the diplomat in residence for the Southwest, and I'm based in Las Vegas, Nevada. What is a diplomat in residence? So I am your regional resource, your local resource. There are over a dozen of us nationwide who cover different regions. We're all experienced diplomats. We've all been doing this career for some time. And we're the person to come to if you've got any questions. We're looking for the talent. We are that regional recruiter. We're looking for folks for our careers. If you're wanting to apply just directly to the Foreign Service, if you're looking for internships, fellowships, some of the things that we're going to cover today, I can also be helpful in just kind of sharing the opportunities that we have and application processes. So I've been in this career. I'm also an alum of one of the fellowships that we're going to talk about. I am a Pickering Fellow. So way back in the day, I applied to the Pickering Fellowship and got it. So the State Department paid for my master's degree. And then I joined as an FSO right after graduation. The Foreign Service is a very unique career and really lifestyle because in the Foreign Service, that's what we call our diplomatic corps. So all those of us like myself who are living and working overseas at U.S. embassies and consulates, in the Foreign Service, you're really expected to spend about half or more of your career overseas. And you can, spend 2/3 or 100% of your career overseas if you like. And there are many financial benefits and other reasons why one would want to do so. But really, we're members of the diplomatic corps. We are representing the U.S. Department of State. We're advancing foreign policy through a number of different avenues. In the Foreign Service, we're really looking for pretty much all majors. And you'll see that when we talk about the 4 State Department Foreign Service fellowships. Of course, we get a lot of poli-sci and international relations, and I myself came from kind of that traditional background. But we're actually looking for a lot of STEM majors, IT folks, engineers, a lot of different, business management, all kinds of different backgrounds, because we have careers in the Foreign Service that serve in all of those different roles. In fact, 2 of the roles that we're going to talk about, 2 of the fellowships that we're going to talk about are maybe 2 types of careers in the Foreign Service that you've never heard of before. So hopefully that will open your eyes to some new opportunities there. With the Foreign Service, in essence, you are, working overseas, advancing U.S. foreign policy. I'm happy to get into kind of any specifics, if there are questions as to what exactly does that look like. It is a lifestyle because you're representing the United States 24/7. You are in this role 24/7 overseas. If there are crises, if there are emergencies, foreign policy issues or natural disasters or whatever might happen, you are called in to play a role of some sort. And so it's important to know going into it, if you do decide to apply, that this is a unique career that's going to involve a lot of travel, a lot of change. You're going to change assignments every couple of years, learn a new language every couple of years, go to a new country, be immersed in a new culture. If that sounds interesting and exciting to you, then these are definitely opportunities I would recommend to take a look at. But we also have domestic positions, which I'll just throw out, there briefly now in case maybe this Foreign Service lifestyle is not, exactly what you had in mind. We have a lot of domestic positions as well. But for me, it's been the adventure of a lifetime. I've met so many different amazing people. I've met the Pope multiple times, presidents, prime ministers, basketball stars. I mean, just all kinds of things. The issues that I've worked on have been super interesting. one of the things I think it's really important to note about the Foreign Service, and one of the reasons why so many of us decide to join, is because we want to do something that matters, right? Like I never wanted, well, I didn't know exactly I was going to be a diplomat or wanted to be a diplomat in college until a recruiter came to my college campus and talked to me. But one of the things I did know is I never wanted a job to just be a job. I always wanted my job to be an extension of my values, an extension of the way that I was going to contribute to the world. And the Foreign Service gives that, a hundredfold. I know in every single assignment that I've had that I've made a difference, whether that's helping some Americans through difficult situations overseas or working on the biggest policy issue. So it really is unlike anything else that's out there, the adventure of a lifetime and super rewarding if you're looking to do good in the world. So I'll just sort of stop there, but as there are questions later, I'm happy to answer things as we go through the slides. Oh, let me also say, sorry, before I forget, could we go back for just one moment, Faye, to that slide that has the diplomat in residence on it? Because I wanted to share two things. So one thing is a link I'm putting in the chat right now. This is a link where you can register with myself at the State Department to let me know what kinds of careers you're interested in, what kinds of internships, and also what kinds of fellowships, so that as these things open up, you can get a direct email in your inbox, the timeline, the application period. A lot of our opportunities, particularly the internships, are only open for like 1 week, maybe 10 days. So it's definitely important to register with us and let us know that you're interested. So that's one thing, is the link in the chat. Again, that's registering with me to let me know what you're interested in. If you do register there, then you'll also be added to my monthly newsletter that I send out to candidates, talking about what careers are coming up, what internships are coming up, what fellowships are coming up. The other thing I'll flag here on this slide, just super briefly, is my email there at the bottom, which is dirsouthwest@state.gov. Again, I'm your local resource. I recruit for Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. I am the one who can, help you answer or get answers for you for questions that you might have on any of our career or student program opportunities. That is myself that checks that email. I check it every day, so it is a human being. I promise it's me. And so I do my best to get back to students as soon as possible. I also can set up virtual office hours as needed for those who want more of a deep dive. So two ways to be in touch with me. One, the link that I shared to register with me, you can get on my distribution from my monthly newsletter. And then also that email, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions following up on what you hear today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. And please do reach out to her if you are interested in really any career opportunities in the Department of State moving forward. Her role at this point in her career is to support interested State Department professionals in any way that she can. So whether it's these foreign service fellowships or domestic opportunities with the State Department or something else that is through the State Department that we talk about later, please heed her invite to reach out to her. I've worked with many students who have worked with Antoinette already, who've met with her, talked with her about her experience in the Foreign Service and with the State Department in terms of deciding if that's the path for them, and keeping focused on those applications and opportunities that are available. So that's not an empty invite. Please do reach out to her. She will be invaluable to you as you consider and pursue a future with the State Department and the Foreign Service. So we have a question, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Antoinette. So they're asking, how would the Foreign Service contribute to careers in government that might not be focused on diplomacy? Does the Foreign Service do that?
So the term Foreign Service, there are actually a couple of different government agencies, and I believe she will cover this in a couple of slides, that have a foreign service, a version of a diplomatic corps. The U.S. Department of State, of course, as the leading foreign affairs agency in the U.S. federal government, we are the biggest. That is our purpose for existing, is to advance U.S. foreign policy. So we have the largest representation, and we own and operate our embassies and consulates overseas. But there are a couple of others. Thank you. On the slide here, you'll see USAID also has a foreign service. Department of Agriculture has a foreign service. The Department of Commerce actually also has a foreign service. So there are a few kind of niche opportunities in those other agencies to be in the foreign service, to be overseas. And their work isn't necessarily going to be tied directly to foreign policy, like Department of Commerce. They're concerned, overseas with making sure that they are that liaison to open up business opportunities for American businesses overseas and to help American businesses understand the economic climate overseas. So it's not exactly foreign policy or tied to diplomacy. Those different agencies will have different roles. USAID, for example, in their foreign service, they're focused very much on development work, right? Now, that is an important connection to foreign policy, though, because it does help us kind of achieve our goals in a number of ways. But if what you mean is sort of, do you need to be coming from a political science background or an international relations background? Are there different things you might do in the Foreign Service? And the answer to the first question is no, you can come from any major. And the answer to the second question is there are many things that you can do in the State Department's Foreign Service. So as I mentioned earlier, you heard me say this term Foreign Service Officer. That's what I am. That's one career that you can have in the State Department Foreign Service. Foreign Service officers, FSOs, we're generalists. So we work on a number of different careers across a number of different issues across our careers. Even though we're generalists, we choose one of 5 areas, and I'll get the link in a moment to share in the chat, one of 5 areas to focus on. That's consular, political, economic, management, and public diplomacy. I do public diplomacy, which is communications and messaging. So as you can see from that list, there are a number of different types of jobs and tasks you might have as a Foreign Service officer. In addition, we have Foreign Service specialists. These are folks in the Foreign Service that we hire because they either have specialized education and or specialized work experience. These are our IT professionals, our engineers, our law enforcement colleagues, our human resources officers, our English language teachers, our doctors. We actually hire doctors and social workers and all kinds of things that you probably didn't even think, but we do hire for all of that. And so all of those roles, might not be working on policy per se, but they're supporting our foreign policy missions and consulates through a variety of roles. I hope that answers the question that you were proposing there.
Thank you, Antoinette. And I have a couple other questions, but they're more focused on the fellowships. So I'm going to hold those off because we're going to move into those in just a moment. And yes, you did answer the question. And I think I did just share a link that is for the 5 career tracks with the State Department. Antoinette, you may have a different link that you want to share as well, but I did share one resource in the chat.
That's perfect. Thank you. That's exactly that list of 5 career tracks I was mentioning.
Great. All right, so now we're going to move, now that we've talked a little bit about the Foreign Service, we're going to move into the graduate fellowships that can help propel you into a career in the Foreign Service, most of them being with the State Department, although as has been mentioned a couple of times with other departments within the federal government as well. So first, those with the State Department. So the 2 largest ones are the Pickering Fellowship and the Rangel Fellowship. Again, both of these are the graduate fellowships of those programs. So both of those are going to be focused on springboarding you into a career in the Foreign Service after you're done with your graduate studies. And those applications are coming due at the end of September. My next slide is going to talk a little bit more about what you get through those fellowships, but I just want to make sure you hear what those fellowships are and think about what the deadlines are coming up first. So we have Pickering and Rangel for the Foreign Service with the State Department. Those are going to be your 2 soonest deadlines if you're interested in applying to them. Then there's the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship. As Ms. Hurtado just mentioned, there are specialists within the Foreign Service as well, and one type of specialist is information management specialists, so people that are in the IT fields. And so if you're not necessarily interested in being a diplomat, but want to put your IT skills and experience to use within the Foreign Service of the State Department, then the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship would be more of a focus for you. This one will open soon and be due later on in the year, probably just after the spring term begins, or around the time the spring term begins, but that will be opening soon, and the deadline will be confirmed when that application opens. I do have an asterisk next to FAIT because I do want to note that this is actually an undergraduate fellowship as well. The rest of them on the page are all specifically graduate fellowships, but FAIT can be for if you are a current sophomore who has 2 remaining years in your undergraduate studies. You can also apply at this point. The benefits and experience that we're going to talk about in a moment is going to be pretty much the same, except for you're finishing out your undergraduate degree, not going forward for your graduate degree. But you can also apply for it if you're planning to enter a graduate program next year as well. So just a little note about the difference between when you can apply for FAIT versus the other ones on this screen. And the last one with the State Department specifically is the relatively new one, the Clark DS Fellowship, Diplomatic Security Fellowship. So this is to be another kind of specialist, if you will, within the Foreign Service, not a generalist Foreign Service officer. This one is if you want to be a special security agent within the Foreign Service of the State Department. Also to pursue graduate studies and then propel you into that career, but more focused on being a safety and security agent for the Foreign Service officers and the diplomats abroad, as opposed to being, again, a generalist Foreign Service officer with the State Department. That one's going to be due at the start of October. So again, all 4 of these, with the exception of FAIT, are already open and are going to be coming due very, very soon, just around the corner. If you're interested with the Foreign Service with a different department within the federal agency, there are 2 options for you depending on kind of what your main focus is. If you are focused more on development efforts, it's diplomatic too, but more working in more developing nations and providing resources and support that are more focused in that realm. The USAID has the Payne Fellowship for graduate studies and to become a Foreign Service officer within that department. That's been a smaller fellowship in years past, but they have been increasing the numbers of fellows and therefore increasing the numbers of Foreign Service officers they have within that department each and every year. And then finally, there's the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So if your focus is more on agricultural efforts abroad and supporting those efforts, and you do have to be very focused in agricultural efforts and planning to pursue graduate studies in an agriculture-focused program, then the USDA might be the Foreign Service that you want to pursue. Their fellowship application is going to be due just slightly later than the rest, October 12th. So again, all of these, with the exception of the IT one, are going to be due within the next 2 months. So if you are, after today's session, ready to you're like, yes, I want to apply for those graduate fellowships when we're done sharing with you, keep in mind you want to get working on that application immediately, because those applications are going to be due before you know it, especially since the semester is just beginning and you're going to be kind of in full swing with focusing on classes starting and everything else that you have going on in your plate. I would say maybe the Clark DS, the security agents, are going to be doing something more along the lines of the Mission Impossible stuff. Maybe not quite, but yes, keeping U.S. folks abroad safe and secure is going to be what their focus is. Just trying to make sure I'm addressing any of the questions.
And I can just add to that briefly. So
yeah.
The State Department, for the Clark Diplomatic Security Fellowship, the State Department has its own law enforcement arm called the Diplomatic Security Service. There are several careers in that arm, one of which is the special agent career that fellowship will lead to. For special agents, they have 3 main pillars that they focus on. One is protection. So you probably think of Secret Service when you think about those who are protecting the president. Our folks protect the Secretary of State, other heads of government and VIP. So protection is one element. Investigations is another element. They're looking very seriously at passport and visa fraud issues. Often, unfortunately, those types of investigations are then connected to broader sex trafficking, drug trafficking, human trafficking, international crimes. So that's the kind of investigative work that they do. And then also they manage the security programs that keep myself and my colleagues safe at our embassies and consulates overseas. As you can imagine, there are a number of actors who would like to do us harm, physically, in the cyberspace, wherever it might be. And so they're in the role of trying to protect us as best they can from those sorts of threats. I'm just going to answer real quick the Genesis question on can we apply to multiple fellowships? Absolutely, and I'm sure Shay would say the same. As she mentioned, some of the rates of acceptance for these are a little bit on the lower side because they're very competitive and very well known. So I always tell people as well, throw in your hat with any of these for which you qualify and see how it all shakes out. In particular, with the State Department fellowships, the Pickering and Wrangell both lead to the Foreign Service Officer career. I always tell folks if you're interested in one, just apply to both. They are almost identical. The only difference between the Pickering and the Wrangell is where you do your domestic internship. For both of them, it will be in Washington, D.C. It's just for the Pickering, your domestic internship will be at the State Department headquarters. For the Wrangell, it will be in Congress. So definitely, I would say throw your hat into any of these for which you're eligible.
Yes, and just adding on to that, oftentimes ONSA works with students and alumni who are applying for multiple of these at the same time. Definitely, if you're applying for Pickering, you want to apply for Wrangell and vice versa. The other ones, it kind of depends on what your focus is, what your goals are, and we can talk through all of that, and I'll share a little bit later on, but again, we're here to provide you guidance through that application process. That's in general what ONSA does, but especially specifically with these fellowships. So, and Genesis, we're going to get into more information about what these fellowships entail. I just wanted to make sure you knew what fellowships we were going to be talking about, as well as those upcoming deadlines, because I wanted to lead with that to make sure those who are going to be applying this year understand the urgency. And now we're going to go into the benefits and eligibility for applying for these. And we'll talk about, in general, those things that apply to kind of all of them, but then we can address some specifics that can vary on different ones as well. So I haven't missed your questions. It's just other questions or things we're going to be addressing here shortly. So in general, these fellowships all provide up to $104,000 over the course of 2 years. That those monies are separated out into primarily funding to go towards your education costs, so tuition and fees for your academic program, and it's split between the 2 years. Then additionally, for each fellowship, you will receive a living stipend that is split between the 2 years. And then on top of that, over the summer, you will have in some form or fashion financial support as you're engaging in the summer internships. So it's providing academic funding for usually your graduate program, but in the case of FAIT, it can also be for your undergraduate program, living stipend for anything else, any other costs that you're incurring, and then some financial support as you're participating in the summer internships, which is another one of the benefits of all of these fellowships. You will participate in 2 summer internships as a fellow in any of these programs. One of those fellowships will be domestic, and one of those fellowships will be abroad. Where that domestic fellowship placement will vary depending on the specific fellowship. Generally speaking, they're in Washington, D.C., but where you'll be placed within Washington, D.C. So for instance, it might be with a congressional office. It might be with the Department of State or with USDA. So it just depends on each fellowship, but you will have a domestic internship that takes place somewhere around Washington, D.C. And then you will have another summer internship that will take place somewhere abroad while you're participating in your academic studies and the fellowship itself. all of them will begin with an orientation that brings you to Washington, D.C., either before you embark on your first internship or before you embark on the fellowship in general. So you'll get a chance to come together with your cohort of fellows before you begin to learn more about the fellowship experience, the experience in the Foreign Service Office, and all of that. Throughout the fellowship experience, you'll receive mentorship from experienced individuals in that particular department and agency. And then finally, all of these are going to lead directly into employment for you within the Foreign Service after you complete your degree and the fellowship, okay? So all of them are expecting that you commit to 5 years as either a specialist, an agent, or a Foreign Service officer within that department that you've received the fellowship from after you've completed it. So most people who go into the Foreign Service end up staying in it for a very long time, if not their entire careers, as evidenced by our special guest today, Ms. Hurtado. Again, she's coming up on 19 years in the Foreign Service with the State Department. So that is typical. But it's also not a lifelong commitment if that's something that's a little too overwhelming to think about. It is a commitment of 5 years, though. Now, life does happen, and sometimes people don't fulfill that commitment for a variety of reasons. If you're not fulfilling the 5-year commitment after you've completed the fellowship, there is a good possibility that you're going to be have to repay the financial support that you received through the fellowship. So that's kind of how that's dealt with. It's on a case-by-case basis, but I mean, life does happen. So just take note of that as well. So in a nutshell, that is what all of these fellowships that we just had on the previous slide are going to provide to you if you're selected as a fellow. Just going to scroll through here. So yes, there is information about the physical requirements. I know that was asked specifically about the Clark DS, but there's actually different tests that you'll have to pass for all of them. With the security one specifically, you actually have to pass that physical readiness test before you're selected for the fellowship. A little bit different there. But there's some different clearances and tests you'll have to do for all of them. And I will be providing, I know Ms. Hurtado has provided a bunch of links so far in the chat. I will be providing some additional resources directly via email to all those who registered for today as well, on where you can find further information on the fellowships, on the Foreign Service, in the various departments, as well as the clearances and tests for each. So if you're missing it in the chat, don't worry, you'll still receive those. Then just to make sure everybody who, if you can't see the chat, there was a question about incentives for forgiveness of student loans if you're working in the Foreign Service. And Ms. Hurtado has answered that yes, the State Department Foreign Service does offer a student loan repayment program. And also there, in general, there's the public service loan forgiveness, which if you're working with any federal agency directly, you would be considered a public service person. So there's also that, as well as likely programs through each of the individual agencies to support with that as well. And the goal of these programs is to hopefully not incur even more debt through your graduate studies if you already do have some debt, even if you don't already have student loan debt, if you're one of the lucky ones. Part of the point of these fellowships is so that you don't accrue more, or at least limit how much more you accrue through pursuing your graduate studies. So in a nutshell, those are the benefits. So who's eligible? First and foremost, to go in the Foreign Service with any of the federal agencies, you do have to be a U.S. citizen. None of the foreign services are open to non-US citizens at this point, and therefore none of the fellowships are open to non-US citizens. There may be other employment or career opportunities within the federal government if you are not currently a citizen, but just know all of these will require you to be a US citizen when you apply. All of them are also going to require that you have a minimum 3.2 GPA. Now, if you've attended multiple institutions and at one institution you weren't at a 3.2 and at another one you were, there are a variety of ways that they will kind of confirm and validate that 3.2 minimum. But in some way that either through one institution individually or through a combination of institutions that you've attended, you do have to meet that 3.2 minimum GPA. If you can't, then you would not be eligible to apply for any of these fellowships. For the graduate fellowships, you have to be planning to begin your graduate program in the following fall. So this is not for individuals who are already in their graduate program, have completed their graduate program. You have to be planning to begin your graduate program when you would start receiving the funding and when you would start the fellowship process. And it does have to be a 2-year US-based graduate program that you're planning to pursue, and it has to be relevant to the foreign service that you would be applying for. That can be very broad when it comes to the State Department. There's a lot of different programs and focus areas that can be relevant to the State Department Foreign Service. And then for like the USDA, it's going to be very narrow. It very directly has to be related to agriculture. For FAIT, it also has to be related to the IT field to become the information management specialist. So it goes from fairly broad and open, although there are some restrictions, to pretty narrow depending on which fellowship specifically that you're planning to pursue. And you do have to pass the relevant medical security suitability clearances, as well as the physical readiness test for the security agents. So that, depending on the specific fellowship, are clearances that you will work on passing through for the most part, once you've been selected as a fellow and kind of begin down that process. If you are selected as a fellow and then are not able to pass through these clearances, then you would not be able to continue on as a fellow and become a foreign service officer. And I'm gonna hand it over to Antoinette for just a moment because I want her to share a little bit about that, what those clearances are looking at in the process, if you don't mind.
Sure, of course. So for the State Department Foreign Service Fellowships, you're going to have this career, right? You're going to join the Foreign Service when you graduate. That's part of the fellowship process. So since you're going to have this career, all of the fellows do need to go through the medical clearance, the security clearance process, and then one final review, which is called a suitability review panel. The medical clearance will assess that you have, general medical health sufficient enough to serve in most of the countries where we have a presence. There is no automatic medical disqualifier. We take a very holistic approach to our review for these. That's not the case for every government agency, but for the State Department it is. Similarly, with the security clearance, we also take a holistic review. So there is nothing that's an automatic disqualifier. For the security clearance, what we're really concerned about are more big picture issues. Can you be trusted with classified information? Are you loyal to the United States? Do you have anything in your background that would make you susceptible to blackmail from a third-party country, another intelligence agency, or whoever else it might be? So we're really not concerned if you've got, a couple thousand in debt on your credit card, or you smoked weed freshman year but haven't done it since. I will say though, because drug use does come up in a lot of the information sessions that I do, My best advice is to start acting now. If you're interested in applying, you plan to apply, start acting now as though you already have a security clearance. So adjust any behaviors that might need to be adjusted. With the drug use piece, just a reminder that at the federal level, marijuana is still considered a regulated drug, regulated substance. So I'll just say that on that front. But really, we're concerned about bigger issues. So, students often say, okay, well, what if, I had some drug use early on? What if I have some credit card debt? What if I have dual citizenship? Dual citizenship is not an automatic disqualifier. They will look into how you've exercised that citizenship. Have you served in another country's armed forces? What are your level of connections to another country? But that's not an automatic disqualifier. So really, we're looking big picture. If you've got any behaviors in the past that you think might be of concern, stop those behaviors now and moving forward, begin with a clean slate. But really, they're concerned about big picture trustworthiness and loyalty issues.
Thank you so much. And in the interest of time, more narrowly focused questions, additional narrowly focused questions about medical and suitability clearances and what may or may not disqualify you. I again encourage you to reach out to Ms. Hurtado directly. Her information was shared previously. It's going to be shared again at the end of the presentation because in the interest of time, we do need to move on from those questions. In regards to the most recent question I've received, having an internship, having completed or planning to complete an internship with the Department of State absolutely would be beneficial in the graduate fellowship application process. It is definitely not a requirement for you to have any State Department experience previously when you apply for the fellowship, but it absolutely can be helpful. So if you've done one of the State Department internship programs, whether an in-person or virtual one, the U.S. Foreign Service internship program, or other opportunities, those can all be beneficial to you in the application process and consideration by the committees. So the final note about eligibility is I do want to just state briefly that there is a financial need requirement for all of these fellowships. So they are looking for students that do have a demonstrated financial need. However, that financial need is defined differently for graduate school than it is for undergraduate studies. It does not mean that you have to have been receiving need-based aid as an undergraduate student, whether that's current or in the past. It doesn't mean you have or could not have had student loans or anything like that. They really are looking for individuals who need some financial support in order to be able to complete their graduate programs, which is not a requirement to be in the Foreign Service, but is definitely a benefit to go into the Foreign Service. And that's why these fellowships exist, is to help you pursue your graduate degree to then become a Foreign Service officer, and again, to hopefully not incur any additional or at least limited additional debt in pursuing that goal. So if finances for attending graduate school is just not a concern for you, it's something that you would be able to afford through your own means, through your family means, without any pause for concern, then that is wonderful. And please pursue your graduate studies, and please apply to be a Foreign Service officer in the future if that's something that you are interested in. These fellowships are not going to be the best path for you. And we can talk more one-on-one if you have questions about whether you fulfill any of these eligibility, including the financial need component in the future. So moving on. So really quickly touching on the application process for all of these fellowships, they will all require some written statements from you, and that is the bulk of the support that our office and me specifically will be providing to you as you work on these applications, is giving you guidance in a variety of ways and feedback as you write these statements. So the personal statement is going to be about who you are, why you're interested in the Foreign Service, why you're prepared for the Foreign Service, why you're interested in graduate school, and I'm here to help you and give you additional guidance after today on what to include on there and help hone that statement. The financial needs statement is going to be very brass tacks about your financial situation so far in terms of how you are or have gotten through undergraduate studies financially, any combination of ways that you've been able to pay for your undergraduate studies, including any loan balances that you have for your undergraduate studies. And then talking about what your plans financially for graduate school are, both if you receive the fellowship, but graduate school costs more than the fellowship provides, or if you don't receive the fellowship. And again, we can talk through that more individually as you begin working on the application. For the International Affairs Fellowship Program with the USDA, the agriculture one, they also require a diversity statement that's going to talk more about your interest in expanding diversity within the USDA Foreign Service. So, and again, we can work through all of those together. That's what's going to take the bulk of your time as you work on any one of these applications. And that's where the bulk of my support is going to come in. So in addition, the second kind of largest portion of your application is going to be 2 letters of recommendation. One of these is going to need to be an academic letter of recommendation. So a faculty member who can speak to your academic preparation for being successful in graduate school. And the other one needs to be a community leader. That is somebody who's going to focus on your skills and experience outside of academics that have prepared you to be successful in a future in the Foreign Service. So these can be supervisors in work, internship, volunteer experiences. They can be mentors, advisors. These can also be faculty members, but they need to be faculty members who can speak to your skills and experience beyond an academic scope. Okay, so I know here at ASU, a lot of students engage in teaching assistantships, research assistantships, additional opportunities outside of the classroom with faculty members. And so it's okay if those faculty members serve as your community leader recommendation letter, but they need to be focusing the bulk of their recommendation on that external stuff, not the academics. So these 2 letters of recommendation will need to be submitted with your application materials by those individuals who are serving as your recommenders. So if you're planning to apply for any of the graduate fellowships in this cycle, that is something else that you need to be starting to think about as soon as possible, is who are you going to reach out to for those letters of recommendation, and confirming that they will be able to, and helping set them up for success to be able to write you the most informed letter they can. So they can be state elected officials. And one thing I will note in terms of letters of recommendation in general, for any fellowship, including these fellowships, please focus on identifying somebody who can speak in most detail and in most praise about the things you've done and the things that you want to do. It is oftentimes a thought to go after somebody who has name recognition, especially if you're applying for something like this that's with the government, somebody who might have name recognition within the government, whether that's an elected official or somebody else that's high ranking in the government. And if that person has worked with you very closely and knows you very well in an academic or professional capacity, then absolutely that person would be a great letter of recommendation for you. But if that person does not know you very well and personally in that capacity, somebody else is likely going to serve as a better letter of recommendation. It's not about who they are, it's about what they can say about you that's going to stand out to the folks reviewing these application materials. So oftentimes that might be if you had an internship or a volunteer experience or what have you with an elected official, oftentimes that might be, you know, their chief of staff or somebody else who directly worked with you most closely. And that is a perfectly acceptable and ideal candidate to write a letter of recommendation for you. And again, if you want to talk through that more in depth one-on-one about what makes the most sense for you, we can do so. And so, yes, these fellowships that we've talked about so far, these graduate fellowships are for if and when you are planning to enter a graduate program in the upcoming fall. So not the fall that has just begun, but that would be fall of 2024. If you're going to apply for these fellowships now, you need to be beginning your graduate program in the fall of 2024. If you already have a graduate degree, that's okay. You need to be planning to begin another graduate program that's more directly related to your goals and plans in the Foreign Service. And you do have to make that kind of case in your application materials. And for FAIT, again, you can also apply for that as a sophomore currently to participate in the fellowship and receive the funds for your final 2 years of undergrad. But that is FAIT only, and that is so that become an information specialist, information management specialist. And you can, if you're applying for multiple fellowships, you can have more than 2 people write letters of recommendation for those various fellowships, but for any one, it's only going to be 2 people. It might be a good idea for you to have in mind some backups to ask if something doesn't work out with one or more of those individuals, but they will only be accepting 2 letters of recommendation for each of those individual fellowship applications. And if you are having individuals, one individual or 2 individuals write letters for different fellowship applications, it's important that they will need to write separate letters and submit them separately. A slight exception is for Pickering and Rangel. Those letters will likely be almost identical, but they will have to write and they will have to submit them to 2 separate applications. I've gotten a question a couple of times for graduate fellowships for students who are currently in graduate school. And we do have a graduate student advisor on our staff here in ANSA who focuses explicitly with current ASU graduate students applying to graduate level fellowships. He has some general graduate fellowship information sessions coming up that are on our upcoming events tab on our website. So I would encourage you to look at those events and sign up for an information session that's more general for current graduate students in terms of possible fellowships, and then meeting with him, Dr. Habsa, in the future to discuss that. Okay, so in preparation for applying for these, I would recommend you to do some research on the department that you're planning to apply to. The role of the Foreign Service within those departments. There's some different things to think about depending on which department and fellowship you're applying to. Ms. Hurtado already mentioned the career tracks and the 13 dimensions of the State Department. In other departments, it may be some other kind of focus areas that you're wanting to research. Again, I will be sending out link resources for that material later, but doing your due diligence and research into those departments and the Foreign Service within those departments to make sure it's best suited for you and prepare yourself for success in the fellowship application process. Also do some research on the partnership schools for each of these fellowships. They do have schools and programs within those schools that have agreed to offer additional financial support to any incoming fellows that are selected. So that is something that can help cover additional costs if the fellowship will not cover your entire costs of graduate school. It is not required to attend a partnership school for any one of these fellowships, but that is an added resource. And if you're not sure where you want to go to graduate school, a good starting point if you're planning to apply for these fellowships. Also, you might want to start, if you're not already, paying attention and kind of subscribing to something like the Washington Post or the New York Times, because they are going to, in general, within the Foreign Service and with these graduate fellowship application processes, they're going to want you to be relatively up to date with current affairs on an international scale. And it will come into play when it comes to the interview and writing exercise component if you're selected as a finalist for multiple of these fellowships. And that's something that we can talk about more in depth later, but staying generally informed about major issues going on in other countries and on a global scale is a good idea. So one way you can do that over the next few months is kind of getting updates or reading regularly these types of newspapers, mostly digitally, but we'll still call them newspapers. So that's just some general upcoming or preparation steps that you can take to apply for these fellowships. Each of them also has their own webinars coming up in the next few weeks from program folks with those individual fellowships, alumni with those programs as well in some cases, that focus in more detail about the application process and about the Foreign Service within that specific department. So please, any one of these fellowships that you're interested in, visit their direct websites, which I will send out in our resources after today's session, and sign up for any of the upcoming webinars that would be helpful to you as you continue to explore this possibility and or work on your applications. I do know that we're a little over time today, so I apologize, and I know some people have popped off already. I'm going to continue on, moving on to just some additional opportunities. If you're not quite at the stage where you would be applying to graduate school and graduate fellowships right now, as promised at the beginning, we do have some other opportunities that we want to share with you that you can be thinking about for this year or beyond. And if you're not quite at the stage of applying to graduate school. So if you want to expand your language skills, there's a variety of national scholarships and ASU specific opportunities that are available to you. And so I'm going to hand it over to my colleague in ONSA, Dr. Stoff, to talk about those.
Hi, everybody. So you might have noticed when Ms. Hurtado introduced herself and put up the slide that listed her qualifications that she was proficient in a number of foreign languages. And so learning foreign languages, particularly those that have been deemed by the US government as critical foreign languages, meaning those that are less commonly taught, the Western European languages like German and French and Spanish are not usually considered critical languages. Those that are very important for our national security interests are good pathways to careers in US government and foreign service in particular. And the US government, particularly the State Department, offers a number of different opportunities for students to gain language learning experience, especially learning the language in the countries where they are spoken, which is really the best way to improve your language skills. So I'm just going to really quickly run through some of the opportunities and tell you a little bit about them. But if you want to know more about them, you are more than welcome to come see me. I'm going to put my email in the chat here. But because for some of these opportunities, I am the only advisor. So I'm the person you need to come talk to at ONSA. So the first one is BORIN, which is a 6-month, usually a semester or a year-long program sponsored by the Department of Defense, which offers students the opportunity to study a critical language broadly conceived, and there are many, many different critical languages that qualify for BORIN, and they will pay for your experience abroad. They do want it to be a longer term experience. So as I said, either semester, 6 months, or a full year. And in return for their sponsorship, they do require you to do a year of service in the US government, but in any US government agency of your choosing. And pretty much they fast track you into a job there. So it's kind of a pretty good deal. Like you get payment for the opportunities to study abroad, and then you get a job when you graduate. The next one is the Critical Languages Scholarship, or CLS, which is a State Department sponsored program. It is a summer intensive program, usually 8 to 10 weeks, in one of 14 different critical languages, where you go to a country where the language is spoken, and you are in this fully immersive program, equivalent to about a year-long study that you would do at home in regular language classes. You manage to achieve proficiency in the 8 to 10 weeks. That's also a fully funded program, and there are no strings attached. There are no requirements for you to serve in the government at all. Additionally, they have a program called CLS Spark, which is a online program for students who do not otherwise have the opportunity to study one of 3 critical languages designated by the U.S. Department of State: Russian, Arabic, or Chinese. So if you can demonstrate that either your institution doesn't offer those, which is not the case for ASU, or because of your major or other reasons you couldn't fit those language classes into your schedule, they will sponsor you in the CLS Spark program so that you can achieve 1 year of proficiency, which then makes you eligible for their in-country programs in those languages in the summer. Gilman is a program actually that Shay advises on, and that's a scholarship program to allow students to go study abroad. You do need to be a Pell Grant recipient to qualify for that, but she can give you more information on that. Additionally, here at ASU, we have some fabulous opportunities for you to study language. We actually have our own Critical Languages Institute, where there are 14 different critical languages taught in a combination of programs that are both here in Tempe, and also some which have components of study abroad. For ASU students, enrollment in the Critical Languages Institute here is tuition free. So that's a really incredible opportunity for you to learn language. Again, it's a fully immersive summer program. It's intensive language study, again, equivalent to about a year's worth of language study. And all you have to do is pay the fee for room and board. There are also scholarships that are available to you that will give you the opportunity to study at the CLI, at our own CLI. I'm going to put the website here in. So basically, if you have the financial need, you can pretty much pay. You can get payment for this program completely. Like, you won't have to pay anything for it, and this will set you up very nicely for then going on to apply for a more highly selective program like the Critical Languages Scholarship or a BORIM. We see these as sort of a pipeline of building up your foreign language experience. We also here at ASU have a Chinese flagship program. So if you're particularly interested in Chinese, I highly recommend that you look into that program here at ASU. We have some of the best Chinese instruction in the state. And we offer, again, opportunities for scholarships for those who have financial need to study. And lastly, the Malikian Center for Russian and East European, Eurasian and East European, Eurasian, no, Russian, Eurasian, East European Studies, sorry, I always get the order incorrect, has another program that we have been granted through a Title VI grant from the Department of Education called the Foreign Languages Area Studies Scholarship, which is FLAS. Again, I'm going to put the website in here for you to be able to take a look at that. Oops, that's not it. And what that does is gives you the opportunity to study, again, one of 14 different critical languages that are part of the area study. So Russia, Eurasia, Eastern Europe. And there are 2 programs. There's a summer program, which offers you $5,000 of tuition coverage plus a $5,000 living stipend. And then there's a year-long program that offers you $10,000 of tuition coverage and $10,000 of living stipend. These are both done through ASU. And I am the major advisor for the Foreign Languages Area Studies Scholarship. So you can come to me and talk to me about those things. So I know that was kind of a whirlwind tour of the language programs, but just know there are many, many opportunities out there for you to get money to study these programs, which will really help you on your path to foreign service.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stoff. And a quick plug that while it is beneficial to come into one of these fellowships with language skills already, it is not a requirement. So if you're like, I'm going to be applying this year to one of the graduate fellowships and I don't have any foreign language skills, that's okay too. But if you're not quite there yet, it is a great way to build your experience and knowledge that would be helpful in pursuing a fellowship and a future career in the Foreign Service. So moving on to some international affairs focused fellowships and ASU opportunities and local opportunities that you might want to pursue, again, if you're not quite ready for the graduate fellowships. So first off, if you are a sophomore or junior and you are interested in the Foreign Service, there is the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program with the State Department, which is a 2-year paid summer internship opportunity. So similar to the graduate fellowships, you will participate in 2 consecutive summers of internship with the State Department, the first one being domestic and the second one being abroad, and both of those will be paid opportunities. You don't get the additional academic funding and all of that. You are also not committed to 5 years in the Foreign Service after this internship program. But if you are seriously considering a career in the Foreign Service, with the State Department specifically, and you're a current sophomore or junior, please look at applying to the Foreign Service Internship Program, which the application will be opening tomorrow and be closing about 1 or 2 weeks after that. So it's a very short, because it's just an internship program. It's an amazing opportunity, but I hate to say just. So it's a little bit different than a whole fellowship, but it's an amazing opportunity. I know I had some questions earlier about what if I'm a junior and that kind of thing. So this is something else to look at. And if you do apply in the next couple of weeks, I'm happy to help you with your application for that. I will include relevant links, as I mentioned in the chat. All of the links that have been shared, as well as some additional ones, will be shared via email along with this presentation later this week. So don't fret. There's also an undergraduate program as part of the Wrangell program. So there's the graduate fellowship through Wrangell, but if you're a current undergraduate student, second, third, or fourth year undergraduate student, so anytime beyond your first year, there's a summer opportunity to spend in DC at Howard to gain preparation and exposure for a future in graduate studies, as well as a future career in international affairs. It's not explicitly to the Foreign Service, although an interest in the Foreign Service is definitely a plus, but you will gain access and exposure to professionals and opportunities within the international affairs realm through that paid summer experience. There's also the Public Policy and International Affairs, or PPIA, Junior Summer Institute, which Ms. Hurtado is also an alumni of. This is a summer program for current undergraduate juniors who will be entering their final year of undergraduate studies next fall, and that you're interested in pursuing graduate studies and a career in public policy and or international affairs. So that's another opportunity that you can apply for. And the Undergraduate Diversity Fellowship is if you have an interest in Asian affairs within international affairs. There's a paid research fellowship that you can apply for through, I'm going to mess up the name of the agency, but if you're interested specifically within the like Asian region within international affairs, that's an undergraduate opportunity as well. Here at ASU and in Arizona and on a national level, there's a variety of opportunities that you can apply for that many students who go on to the Foreign Service Fellowships have engaged with as an ASU student. That's the McCain Institute program, The ASU Center on the Future of War, as well as the ASU Center on Religion and Conflict, have internship and research opportunities, Capital Scholars Program, various State Department internship opportunities, as well as any local or federal congressional internships are all great experiences that can help build towards being a competitive candidate for the Foreign Service in the future. Thank you, Josh. The National Bureau of Asian Research is what the undergraduate diversity fellowship is with. So just really quick. Okay. So, and I know we're flying through this. There's more information to be shared later and more resources we have for all of these opportunities in the future. If you're interested in going abroad, while you're an undergraduate or after, there's a variety of programs that can help you do that we advise on as well. The Voyager Scholarship is for anybody interested in a public service career. You apply as a sophomore and receive generous funding for your education costs, as well as funding and resources to have international work experiences while you finish out your undergraduate degree. The Gilman Scholarship is a study abroad scholarship if you are a Pell Grant recipient, and they have a critical language supplement to that if you're going abroad specifically to studying one of the languages that they fund. Then there's the Fund for Education Abroad, which is just for those with any financial need in order to study abroad. Freeman Asia, also for those with a financial need who want to study abroad in Asian countries specifically. FUCSI is for our early undergraduates in the room. It's the Fulbright UK Summer Institute program for those who have not had much, if any, international experience previously. And you spend 3 to 4 weeks fully paid at a summer institute in the UK. The Killam Fellowship is to spend a semester while you're an undergraduate student in exchange at a Canadian university. The Frederick Douglass Fellowship is to spend a summer doing some international travel and programming that is focused on the history of social and civil rights in the world. So each year it's a little bit different, but there will be a travel component to it and mentorship and guidance that's provided throughout that experience. And you can apply for that anytime in undergrad until your final year. The Fulbright US student program is for only after you have a bachelor's degree. So the earliest you can apply for it is as a graduating senior, but you can also apply for that after you've already completed your bachelor's degree, while you were a graduate student, all the way up until you have earned a PhD if you're on that track. But the Fulbright US student program is to spend an academic year abroad, engaging in either academic study, research, or teaching English. The teaching English version of the Fulbright program is very common and popular amongst folks who also want to go into the Foreign Service. And we've had many of our Foreign Service graduate fellowships, fellows have participated in the Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship Program. And then the final one I'll note right now is CBYX, Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange, to spend an academic year in Germany that includes both language learning, academic study, and a professional placement in the field that you're interested in. So any and all of these are great experiences for you that we advise on, that you don't have to be interested in a future in foreign service, but would be great experience if you are. So here is the contact information again for all of the individuals that you've seen here today. Dr. Stoff was my colleague in ANSA who advises specifically on the Critical Languages Scholarship, both the regular one and the Spark version, the virtual version, as well as here at ASU, she advises on FLAS, the Foreign Language and Area Studies grant opportunity. So she's going to be a great resource for you, especially if you're studying languages. wanting to pursue studying languages. If you just have questions in general about working with the State Department, opportunities with the State Department, life in the Foreign Service, again, Ms. Hurtado, our Southwest diplomat in residence, who you heard from earlier, is going to be a great resource. Again, please, please reach out to her directly. She is happy to speak with you and answer any questions that she can. And then myself, if you are interested now or in the future in applying for any of the Foreign Service focused fellowships, the Gilman Scholarship, or if you just want to hear more about any of the opportunities I talked about here today, then please feel free to reach out to me directly. You may also sign up for an individual appointment with our office. Here's our next steps in general with national scholarships. Research your options further. If you're not certain what you want to pursue as of right now, look at our website, look at our scholarship database, look at the links that I'm going to send you later on this week, and just do a little bit more digging about what you might be interested in. If any of the awards require nomination from your campus, from ASU, please note there is an earlier campus deadline. That is not the case for any of the Foreign Service Fellowship opportunities. But for some other things I spoke about today, it is, like the Fulbright US Student Program. So just note those earlier deadlines that you must submit your application materials. Sign up to receive our newsletter, which we send out once a week, and we keep you up to date on upcoming deadlines when applications open. Hopefully, like when FAIT opens soon, we'll include an announcement there. And schedule an appointment with our office. You can do that directly through our website, and you can do a general appointment. If you're an undergraduate student, do a general undergraduate appointment and meet with me. If you're a graduate student, do a general graduate appointment and meet with my colleague, Dr. Hopsa. And if you're already like, yes, I'm going to work on the Foreign Service applications, you can schedule an appointment to specifically start working on those application materials and get any further questions you have answered. And do this, meet with our office, research your options as many times and as often as you need over the next many years, wherever you're at in this academic and professional journey. Because again, please keep in mind our office supports the entire ASU community. That's undergraduates, graduate students, and alumni. So even if you've already attended ASU and we're in a little bit in your rearview mirror, we're still here to support you if you're applying for any of these kind of fellowship opportunities in the future. So that is all I have for you today. I am going to stop my recording. Maybe.